Blog Talk Radio.
They walk among us, now on A View from the Bunker. On a crisp night in the heartland of America, welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Tonight we'll talk a little bit about media and how it can influence people, especially people who might not necessarily be open to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, our guest for tonight is a gentleman who's been an actor since 1986. He served as an award-winning writer, director, and actor in corporate videos for about the last 15 years. And he's also served as a missionary, visiting 15 countries over the last half dozen years or so. And now he's developing a television project that looks to me like the best elements of the X-Files and Millennium put together, but from a Christian perspective. It's our honor to welcome Rob Skiba to the bunker tonight. Rob, good to talk with you again. We had the chance to meet in Canton, and it's good to to spend a little more time.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on tonight. Man, what a conference that was, huh?
It was. As much for the fellowship as for anything else. But the thing that really amazed me, the thing that I took away, which I guess is kind of embarrassing to admit because this is something that guests on this program and on PID Radio have been talking about for the last 5 years, is that science is a religion. I shouldn't have let it surprise me the way it did, but it was. What was the thing that you took away from the Supernatural Science and Prophecy Conference?
Oh, man, it was just great to be around a bunch of people who get it, because, if you're talking about this stuff to most people, they look at you like you have three heads, they think you're kind of a freak or something,
And suggest you might be happier at the church down the road?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, we've run a few people off ourselves, just hearing from the experts in the various fields that I've been studying for a long time. Mm-hmm. And to actually sit and talk with the people one-on-one, go to dinner with them, it was really amazing.
Well, sadly, we got into town. Sharon got into town a little late on was it Friday evening, so that we weren't able to share dinner with you and your lovely wife Sheila. But we did have a chance to have breakfast on Sunday morning, and that was it just a fascinating discussion, the kind of thing that Sharon and I talk about all the time. Which is essentially what we talk about on PID Radio. We just turn on the mics and share it with other people. But it's, as you say, unusual and a real blessing to have the chance to talk about that with other believers. So
I have to tell you, as soon as we got home, your wife talked on biotechnology and that sort of thing.
Right.
And we got home to Dallas, where we live, and we happened to watch the X-Files. We ended up watching the episodes called the Erlenmeyer Flask.
The Erlenmeyer Flask, yes.
Yes, that one's loaded. At first, the episode starts dealing with transgenics and human-plant cloning hybrids and microbiological evidence of alien virus, which was based on a new base pair in the DNA, and an experiment called purity control. And they are led to a warehouse in the course of the episode called Zeus Storage.
Right.
And the address of the warehouse was 1616 Pandora Street.
Uh-huh.
And knowing Chris Carter and the people over there at the X-Files, they load the series with symbols and stuff all the time. And so I went and looked up Revelation 16:16, and it basically talks about them, just like Revelation 19:19, gathering in the place that in the Hebrew is called Armageddon. So, of course, Pandora. That's kind of interesting. So Fox goes there and finds a bunch of hybrid humans in water tanks, right? And Scully goes to the 7th floor of the Georgetown University building, the cryogenics floor, and discovers a frozen alien baby. And there's a really interesting dialogue with the character named Deep Throat. Later, Deep Throat gets killed and the alien baby package gets taken away to the Pentagon. This is where it gets really weird because the smoking man takes the evidence and puts it in this warehouse, kind of like Indiana Jones, at the end of the first movie. And then he leaves and he closes the door behind him, and the camera goes in on the sign on the door, which said Pentagon. It says, "In case of fire or emergency, know your exits." And below that it had a picture of the Pentagon evacuation procedure, and it shows an arrow going right from the point where the plane hit 7 years later.
Oh, really?
And as the video is about to fade to black, I hit pause because I was freaking out, And when I hit pause, it paused at 45 minutes and 11 seconds. 4 plus 5 is 9 plus 11. It's 9/11.
9/11. Okay. Oh boy.
And the seventh floor being 7 years later, I'm going. I'm a conspiracy freak, so I was just going nuts watching that. But I thought you'd enjoy that just because all the stuff we were talking about up there.
Yeah. There are a lot of interesting memes there, and I'm not sure that all of those memes are put in by the human actors. I think those things may have
made their way in there.
Made their way in there or been influenced. The human actors may have been influenced by the powers and principalities that with which we contend. Rob, a little bit of background on you.
Sure.
Before we get into talking about your proposed series called Seed, you've been acting for near 25 years now, and how do you go from? I mean, are we talking dinner theater or college acting, high school? What's the career path from 1986 to 2010?
Well, I'm actually going to back up a little bit farther to 1977. And I was 7 years old, sitting in a darkened theater watching Star Wars for the first time. And after I saw it 13 more times in the theater the first year it came out, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I said I was either going to be an astronaut, a movie star, or a filmmaker by the time I was 30, or I'd be dead. And it wasn't because I thought I had a death wish or anything. I just figured if I hadn't achieved those goals by the time I was 30, it was because I was dead. So I got busy right away, and I got a 8mm camera. It was pretty much glued to my face growing up. But my first ambition was to be an astronaut and joined the Army, flew helicopters with ambitions of getting into various flight programs to lead me to NASA, but that never happened. So that was when, after numerous attempts, it didn't work out. I said, you know what, I think I need a career change. And in 1993, I got out of the service, did a stint with an organization that's the initials were C and I and A.
Okay.
For about a year, and they were going to send me off someplace, and it was one of those deals where if you got sick, hurt, or killed, but nobody knows you exist. Things. I was like 25 years old. I thought I'm a little too young for that. So then I ended up getting a gig with Alvin and the Chipmunks, and toured around the country yelling Alvin. And that reignited some the acting juices that I had actually got started in high school. I helped to start the drama club in my high school. And so that got me into college theater. Actually helped start a few community theater groups and stuff like that. And then that naturally progressed back into having a camera again, shooting some and writing some of my own stuff, and then doing corporate video. Mm-hmm. And did corporate video for about 14 years or so. And then that led me down to Dallas, where I ended up working for an international missions organization and creating documentaries that help missionaries to create awareness for what they do and raise support. So it's been quite an amazing journey.
Yeah, and kind of a strange one too. I mean, from military, a brush with the intelligence services, and then missionary in the foreign field, which sometimes sadly overlaps with intelligence work. But and
the chipmunks in the middle.
And the chipmunks in the middle. So yeah, well, I can relate. So the inspiration for your proposed sci-fi series, Seed, where does it come from?
Boy, that comes from a lifetime of research. I've always been fascinated with the dynamics of the flood. I asked the question in 5th grade when they were trying to force evolution down my throat. I said, if we came from monkeys, how come they're still monkeys? And nobody can answer that question very well, to my satisfaction. And I asked it every year in between my junior high school and high school. They stopped calling it the theory of evolution and started calling it just evolution. And I thought, wow, they proved a lot over summer vacation. And so I just found myself getting into a lot of debates in school, and a lot of the students were actually leaning more towards what I was saying than what the teachers were saying. And so as I continued to do my studies, I started finding out a whole bunch of interesting things. In particular, we start looking at the last days. Jesus made the statement, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. And one of the things that I didn't really study a whole lot, because I was more obsessed with the dynamics of the flood itself, was the reason for the flood. And that starts in Genesis chapter 6. And Genesis 6 begins with the sons of God coming down to the daughters of men and creating what the Bible calls Nephilim. Now, that's a little bit of the background. I've always had that kind of in the back of my head, but one of my last mission trips was to Cyprus. And there was a missionary conference taking place there, and it was an opportunity for me to get a lot of people in one place and get a bunch of stories. So I started interviewing people, and as part of that trip, I got to go to Greece. It was actually my second time going to Athens. And while I was there, you literally cannot look in any direction without seeing a mythological creature. You know, there's sculptures, paintings, everywhere you look. You see a centaur, a minotaur, a satyr or something. And I thought to myself, man, nobody's going to remember Yoda 4,000 years from now. So why is it that this culture still they have all these creatures, these so-called, mythological creatures in their collective consciousness, if all it was a story written by a blind poet named Homer? There must be some truth to this. And I came back home with that thought in my head, and I was telling my wife about it, and we had a discussion about it that night and went to bed. The next morning, she checks her email, and there was an article in her email there. It said, scientists have successfully cloned a sheep with a human heart. And the article went on to say if they keep doing this, eventually what they're going to have is the genes are going to fuse together, and you're going to have an animal-human hybrid, and then there are going to be all kinds of ethical issues to deal with at that point. And so look at this, And as I kept doing my studies, that just really got me intrigued, and I started really diving in. I found the book of Joshua. And, I just say this, that the Bible has a lot of books. It mentions a lot of books that aren't in the Bible.
That's true.
Actually, a lot more than you would think. And one of them in particular, the book of Joshua, is mentioned twice. And so, I had seen some stuff online with regards to animal-human hybrids in reference to that book, and I've always been intrigued by what is that book anyway, so it was just another reason to go find it. And it didn't take me long. You don't get very far in the book, and it starts telling you what happened in Genesis 6. One of the things it says is that one of the things the Watchers, the angels that came down and mated with women, one of the things that they did was teach the art of mixing one species with another. And then it goes on to describe all the things and the theories that I already had. So it was like validation for what I was thinking. As I started looking at all this, the first prophecy in the Bible is God having the discussion with Adam and Eve and the devil, and says to the devil that Eve's seed is going to crush his head. And, you don't have to turn but a few more pages and you realize the devil said, oh, yeah? Well, then I'm going to mess up the seed, And that's when you get Genesis chapter 6. So that just became the natural title for the series because it's all about the seed.
So the interpretation of Genesis 6 that the Christian church has adopted ever since pretty much Julius Africanus, Augustine, in the 6th century or 5th century, has been the line of Seth and the line of Cain. And you're going back then to the earlier interpretation held by the Jewish rabbis and the early church fathers, and the view then espoused by the likes of Chuck Missler, Mike Heiser, and so forth, that Genesis 6 is to be taken literally, that there were giants in the land in those days.
I was actually raised to take the Bible literally, and I think you really have a big problem if you go the Seth route. For one thing, you can't really... I used to always say growing up that, and I was kind of taught this, that you can't just read the Bible. You have to study it because it wasn't written in English, for one thing. So you lose a lot if all you're reading is English, because the English language, just by comparison to the Greek, and even worse when you compare it to the Hebrew, it's bankrupt. It just can't describe as well as the Greek and the Hebrew does. And in the Hebrew, it says the Ben Elohim, which is used in other places, like when Lucifer presents himself in the book of Job. It's clearly, as you read in the book of Job, it's the angels. So why would you view it as the angels in Job, but not in Genesis? Even more so when they start talking about giants. If it was just Cain and Seth's deal, how do you get giants?
Yeah. In fact, we were just watching some videos of Chuck Missler's on this teaching things that we watched about 10 years ago, on TV today. We plugged Sharon's laptop into our TV so we could watch it on a real screen instead of you get to our age, Rob, we're a little older than you are. The eyes start to go a little bit, so the big screen is helpful.
Sure.
So how does this paradigm, this divine council paradigm, where you've got the fallen angels who rebelled against God, and the contamination of the human genome, the bloodline, in their attempt to destroy. To destroy the bloodline from which the Messiah will come. How does that form the basis of seed?
Well, if you look right from the beginning there, when they're trying to destroy, if you're talking about the bloodline, they're trying to destroy the bloodline that would lead to the Messiah. And when God is looking down at the earth and he sees Noah, Scripture says that he is found upright and just and righteous in his generation. It was like three synonyms there. So upright and just, yeah, he was a good guy, but in the Hebrew, righteous in his generation could literally be translated pure in his genetics. Mm-hmm. And so if you're looking at Noah and his wife, and God's looking at the whole earth, and those were only two left that he could bring his Messiah through, he had to preserve them. And if you consider Noah and his wife being pure, then obviously, well, his sons were pure too. But Scripture says there were giants in the land in those days and also afterwards meaning after the flood. So, and that starts showing up in Ham's lineage right away, within 100 years after the flood. So I look at that and say, well, if Noah and his wife were pure and the sons were pure, then there must have been some kind of dormant Nephilim genetics or something in the wives, or at least in Ham's wife, because you just look at the four children of Ham, and they're loaded with giants. Ham had Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And, of course, we know that Canaan settled what we call the Holy Land, Israel. Mm-hmm. Those were all the ites that Joshua and everybody else had to wipe out. They were all giants. And they walked and they said, we're like grasshoppers compared to these people. They're pretty huge. But something I found really interesting was kind of diving into Mizraim's lineage. Mizraim is Egypt. And one of his sons was Caphtor, the Caphtorites. Oh,
right.
From whom came the Philistines.
Right.
Now, if you look up Jeremiah 47:4, and I believe it's Amos 9:7, it talks about the Caphtorites settled in Crete, which I find really interesting because we know that he's the father of the Philistines, of which Goliath, one of the most famous giants, came. He settles in Crete, and Crete's where all the Greek mythology originated from. All of Greek mythology comes out of Crete. In fact, I was amazed to see just how much of what we would now call Europe was subject to this tiny little island. How is that? But if you consider characters like Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades might have been hanging out there, it starts to make some sense.
So what do you draw from that? What conclusion do you draw?
Well, one of the things that I hope that Seed will help to show is where a lot of the mythology comes from. There's a History Channel special that was on recently on the gods, and mm-hmm. of course everybody focuses right on Zeus. He's kind of the big one. And this whole, it's like an hour-long special on Zeus and how he literally ruled the ancient world for 3,000 years. I mean, nobody could touch Zeus, Mm-hmm. It says, but there was one challenger that he didn't count on. And then the commentator makes the statement, Jesus Christ. And I was thinking about that because if you think one of the wonders of the ancient world was the Temple of Zeus.
Right.
And then the Temple of Zeus is this huge 50-foot high, gold statue of this massive muscular guy, bearded guy with lightning bolts, that ruled with an iron fist for 3,000 years. And then you think of Jesus. This humble carpenter from Nazareth, and that he toppled Zeus's regime, after 3,000 years. Mm-hmm. And there's a trip that my wife and I, we weren't married at the time, but we went to Israel in 2005, and have you been to the Holy Land?
I have not, no.
Oh, it's amazing because it's such a small country, and literally everywhere you go, something happened, and it's really, it's like, wow, this is where David, we got to pick up stones in the brook or whatever, where they believe David picked up 5 smooth stones, and
It's amazing after 3,000 years there are any stones left in
Yeah, right, everybody going there to pick up stones.
Yeah.
But one of the places that impacted me the most was Caesarea Philippi. And there's a passage in the Scriptures that I could never understand, and it's where Jesus takes his disciples to Caesarea Philippi, and he asks the question, "Who do you say that I am?" And the disciples say, well, some say Elijah, some say one of the prophets, whatever. They're all saying all these different people. And then Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus gets extremely excited by that answer. And he said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father which is in heaven. And upon this rock I'm going to build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail, and I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom." And, it's like, wow. Jesus gets real excited about that, but I could never understand that because that's the end of his ministry.
Mm-hmm.
When at the beginning of his ministry, Nathanael said the same thing. "You are the Son of God." And he says, "Why? Because I saw you under the fig tree?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you're going to see greater things than that. And every time the demon-possessed people saw him, they said the same thing. They cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he would tell them to be quiet. So I'm thinking, even when he was a baby, they prophesied over him that he was the Son of God, in the temple. And so it's like, okay, literally from his birth to the beginning of his ministry and all through his ministry, they called him the Son of God. So why is it such a big deal when Peter said it? And I could never understand that until I actually stood in the location where that conversation took place. And that conversation took place in front of the altar to the Greek god Pan, which was at the base of Mount Hermon.
Right.
And this is so significant on so many levels because, first of all, Pan was the Greek god of shepherds. And so right there you've got the good shepherd standing in front of the Greek god of shepherds. I think that's just kind of neat. Mm-hmm. But if I was shooting the scene, with a camera, I could see Jesus with his back to the altar of Pan. It was kind of like a miniature Petra type thing. If you can imagine, like it's all embedded in a cliff, like the city in the Petra. And if you can imagine Jesus with his back to all this altar thing, and Peter's looking at Jesus, and I could see it's like a rack focus where Peter's got Jesus in focus, and all of a sudden he looks over his shoulder and sees Pan. Pan comes into focus, Jesus goes out of focus. And then Pan goes out of focus, and Jesus comes back into focus, and Peter goes, "Oh, I get it. You are the Son of the living God."
Mm-hmm.
That's right, Peter. Not these, upon this rock I'm going to build my church, not this rock behind me, I am the living God. I'm not a God made of stone, you know what I mean? But what was even more significant about that conversation was just off to Jesus' left was an actual place known in the ancient world, even today, is known as the gates of Hades. Now, what's interesting to me about that is Hades is not just a place, it's a person. Hades is the brother of Zeus, the guardian of the underworld. And just off to Jesus' right, or the other side, depending which way you're looking at it, was a foothill, and at the top of the foothill was the fortress of Nimrod, who was the first Antichrist. Yeah, right at the top there's a little foothill. Do you have Google Earth?
Yeah.
Oh, I can send you some coordinates.
Yeah, send me the coordinates. I'm really curious about this. Now, I knew about the Grotto of Pan and at the foot of Mount Hermon. I talked with Judd Burton about this a couple of months ago, and it was really the first time I'd heard about that. So you're right. The location is very significant, but I'd not heard about the fortress of Nimrod right there, which is
it's literally, if you were looking at the altar of Pan, off to your left would be the gates of Hades, and just up to your right, it was a foothill. Mount Hermon's actually a whole mountain range, and there's like a little foothill just off to the right, and at the top of it's the fortress of Nimrod. I mean, Nimrod's the first Antichrist who tried to create a one-world system without God.
Right.
In fact, he wanted to kill God. So it's pretty significant that Jesus has this discussion right there, especially when you consider his destination was Jerusalem. He's at the end of his ministry. He knows what he's got to do. So why does he take a detour and go all the way to the very top of Israel to have this conversation?
Yeah, the foot of Mount Hermon, sure.
And I believe that the significance of that is Mount Hermon. In the book of Joshua and Enoch, the book of Enoch, they talk about 200 of the fallen angels landed on Mount Hermon in the days of Jared, Noah's, I think, great grandfather. And if you say, well, how many fallen angels how many angels fell with Lucifer? 1/3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's 1/3 of 100? 33.
33. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, David Flynn's done some amazing research on this, and Tom Horn as well. And they point out, in fact, if you go to Google Earth, you can see it for yourself, that the center of the mountain range that we call Mount Hermon is located at 33.33 degrees north by 33.33 degrees east from the Paris prime meridian, which used to be the prime meridian before they changed it. And if you do a Wikipedia on the Paris prime meridian, it's also known as the Devil's Line. So
interesting.
Pretty interesting. And so when you think about, okay, there's a third of the angels that follow Lucifer, 33.33%. This is the only geographical location on the entire planet that actually represents their number.
33, yeah.
I mean, that's mind-boggling. I mean, the books of Enoch and Joshua, they didn't know that. It's not recorded in there what the coordinates are. But you go on Google Earth and you do a little poking around and you see, whoa. And so it says after this little discussion that Jesus has, he says it says that he took Peter, James, and John to the top of a high mountain. Well, it's the highest mountain in the region by far, and they're in the area anyway, Mount Hermon. So the peak of Mount Hermon. So many theologians, as do I, believe that was the mountain of Transfiguration. And what's interesting about that today is there's actually a UN outpost on top of Mount Hermon in that location right now. In fact, you can see pictures of it on Google Earth. They got little pop-outs. You can see little pictures. And it's literally right across from a cross that people, I guess like myself, that believe that that's the Mount of Transfiguration. They mark that area, So you got this cross and you got this UN, I think it's a radar outpost, which I find really interesting. It's kind of like, what are they looking for? And you consider his statement as it was in the days of Noah, so is it going to be in the coming of the Son of Man? When Jesus goes to the Mountain of Transfiguration, he could literally look off to his right and see the location of where Zeus and Hades and Poseidon were created. He could look down to see where Nimrod, the first Antichrist, his fortress is. He could look down and see the gates of Hades and the altar of Pan, which is a animal-human hybrid offspring of the gods. And, that's pretty huge when you think about it.
Yeah, it is, all in that one place.
All in one place. And so what was he doing there? And I've talked about this a lot to my friends and stuff. I said, I think it's like the movie Rocky. At the beginning of Rocky, the first movie, the very first thing you see when they fade from black is an image of Jesus. They pull off from the picture of the face of Jesus to this little boxing ring, and, Rocky's a nobody. He's fighting a nobody. Nobody knows he exists. And there's a sign below the face of Jesus that says resurrection something. I forget what it says on there, but it's kind of a setup right there, because then later he gets a chance to fight the heavyweight champion of the world, Apollo Creed, right? Well, when you realize that Apollo is a son of Zeus and Creed is the belief system of a people,
right?
And Rocky, Jesus is the Rock, he's the Rock. It's pretty symbolic. He goes and before the big fight, he goes to the ring. And he walks into the ring and he sees this huge poster of Apollo Creed. It's like he surveys the ring. Then he goes home and he talks to Adrian and he says, I just want to go to the distance with Creed. No one's ever gone the distance with Creed. And sure enough, he gets in the fight and he goes 15 rounds with the heavyweight champion of the world. And at the end of it, even though he took the beating of his life, he was still standing. And if you think about part 2, Rocky, the Rock, comes back with the second coming. He gets married, and then he beats him. So I'm like, I don't know if Sylvester Stallone knows what he's doing there, but I think that's a great analogy for what I believe Jesus was doing, is he went and surveyed the ring. You guys tried to stop me from being here in Genesis chapter 6. It's like, I got your number. And then, then Mickey and Polly show up, Moses and Elijah, they give him a pep talk,
There you go.
It says from that point on, he went preaching about his death, burial, and resurrection and headed straight from there to Jerusalem, where he went 15 rounds with the devil and was still standing when it was all over.
Well, that's powerful stuff. And again, you don't know if that was ever in the mind of Sylvester Stallone when he wrote the script,
no
but
idea.
You can certainly use it as a good analogy. We're talking to Rob Skiba. He's the writer, author, producer, director of the forthcoming TV series Seed on A View from the Bunker. I do want to get to a little bit of an overview of the series
Sure.
Seed and how this this awesome information, and it is fascinating. What sort of creative juices that fired? Where is this series going to go? How long do you project it lasting, and what's the story arc?
Yeah. I had a friend of mine who read episode 1, and he knows I've got a whiteboard in my studio that it's barely got 10% of what's in my head on there. I'm trying to get it out as fast as I can, but I've outlined 72 episodes. And I think that's really important going into anything like a project like this, because I don't know about you, but I was really disappointed by Lost, the way it ended.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like, I guess I could compare it to Battlestar Galactica. I thought Galactica had a great ending for 4 years that you had invested in these characters. They wrapped it up nicely. Mm-hmm. And I think that they had a little better picture of the ending from the beginning and kind of worked in between. So that's what I want. I want to have a story that has a complete arc that's going to wrap up well. It's everything that you invest in the beginning will pay off in the end. And so I've outlined 72 episodes. I've got I've got the first episode finished and just about finished with the second one, and I'm writing the third one at the same time. But I like to say that it's Lost meets Battlestar Galactica wrapped up in an X-File, written from a biblical worldview. So without giving too much away, it's going to have the mystery and intrigue that made the show like Lost so popular. Mm-hmm. It's going to have the sci-fi appeal and maybe political commentary type things that shows like Battlestar Galactica and Star Trek had. And it's going to have, of course, the alien agenda type themes and conspiracy themes that made the X-Files so popular. But the difference is, what's going to make this different is it's going to be written very much from a biblical worldview, although I say that with the caveat that this is not going to be a Christian TV series. Does that make sense? I'm not out there trying to say, hey, it's not the next Left Behind series. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's going to deal with the same kind of themes that a lot of the shows are on TV right now that, quite frankly, I think are programming us to believe a lie. If you look at The Event, is another one that everybody's talking about right now. A friend of mine, I started to say earlier, has read my stuff, has seen my board, has talked with me a lot, and he said, if you took The Event and Seed and compared it in a Matrix-like framework, he said The Event would be the blue pill. You're writing the red pill.
I've only seen the first episode of The Event, but I think I get where he's going. So,
yeah. They've been writing movies about alien encounters and things and UFOs and all that since the 40s, since Roswell. But it's all if you've been watching the History Channel lately, there's a whole series called Ancient Aliens, mm-hmm, and they're really going along this line that ancient visitors from other worlds came here and seeded our planet, and human beings are the result of that. And so I have to ask the question. They had this supposed UFO sighting or whatever, whether it was balloons or whatever, in Manhattan just 2 days ago.
Right.
But UFO sightings are increasing exponentially every year.
Strange and mysterious lights hovering above East El Paso tonight. What's even more strange, very similar lights were spotted in Manhattan just 2 days ago. Above the skies of Northeast and East El Paso tonight, a sight that was a little more than stunning. This is what one of our photographers, Ram Moreno, caught on video. One solitary light that appears to be falling in the sky. But that light suddenly breaks apart into two, then three separate lights. Those lights then just freeze in the air and begin to hover. Eventually, a fourth light can be seen. Then the lights appear to be hovering and then moving in a strange pattern. Then they all disappear. We received a lot of phone calls into our newsroom tonight from people in the northeast part of town and on the east side, all of them wanting to know what was going on. And the descriptions from everyone calling basically the same. One caller thought a plane was falling. Another thought it was a meteorite. Others, though, said it looked like a UFO. Now, you want to get really creepy? Check this video out. Just 2 days ago, in the sky above Manhattan, people froze on the street there as they saw these 3 lights hovering in the middle of the day. And check this out. The 3 lights are close to each other, then spread out into this triangle pattern. Now, look at the patterns side by side. This from Manhattan and the other tonight in El Paso. I gotta tell you, they do look eerily similar.
What's going to happen one day when one of these balls of light opens up and somebody pops out and says, "Hi, we created you"? What are we going to believe?
So the Christian message then in Seed, is it how are you going to try to work that in?
I am going to take this much more from the Genesis 6 perspective in terms of what I believe all this alien stuff is that we're seeing. I personally believe it's repackaged Nephilim activity. If I'm to take Jesus' words literally, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man.
The trick, or the difficulty, which I discovered in writing The God Conspiracy, is to try to present a particular worldview without beating the viewer over the head.
Absolutely.
How are you striking that balance?
Follow the same model they've followed. I was talking with a guy last night, and he said, we have to be as good at telling the truth as the devil is at telling lies. And so if you look at the way we have been programmed to believe a lie, everybody's got an agenda, everybody's got a worldview that they put forth in their art, they put forth in their writing, and they put forth in their movies or whatever. So we're all on even ground in that regard. I think the problem that Christians run into is they always want to preach, the Bible says all the time, in a venue where people want to be entertained. People don't go to the movies and watch TV to be preached unless they're surfing to a preaching channel. They go to be entertained. So there's something you can do with science fiction that's pretty amazing, because people go into science fiction with a certain level of suspension of disbelief. If you've sold them on whatever your concept is, they'll start watching it. And my hope is that the themes and the things that we bring into this, the symbols and whatnot that we put in there, will get people talking, will get people blogging, will get people arguing and debating. The movie Knowing, I found to be a very interesting movie. And the reason I thought it was interesting is because, you get 3/4 of the way through this movie, and there's a big budget, A-list movie star, and he calls his dad about 3/4 of the way through the movie and says, "Dad, when you were preaching about the gifts of the Spirit," and starts talking about prophecy. Now, we can argue all day long about the way the movie ended. That's not where I'm going with it. When I left that theater, I said, if this movie is meant to get people asking questions and debating each other, it's going to do its job. And it wasn't a week later that a major movie reviewer came out and said almost his exact words. I think debate is healthy. I think discussion is healthy. And that's what I want to do. I want to create stories that are intriguing, that put some of these elements that I've talked about here, and a lot more that I'm not talking about because I don't want to give everything away, but put it out there in a way that will get people. I quite honestly, I can envision the church giving me a bit of trouble every now and then too, just because of the nature of some of the subjects we're talking about, the same kind of problems that Russ Dizdar and others run into when they talk about these things. But people who get involved with watching the TV show and get excited about it and try to figure things out, they'll create their own fan-based websites. They'll start blogging, start trying to figure things out. And, my hope is that they do start doing their own research and finding a lot of cool stuff out, just like I found out. And then I didn't have to preach anything.
Our guest is Rob Skiba on A View from the Bunker. He's the writer, director, producer of the forthcoming television series Seed. Bunker phone is open if you've got a question for Rob about the use of an entertainment medium like television to plant a seed in the minds of people. 646-652-4429. The enemy that you present, I don't want to give anything away that you don't want to give away, that makes his appearance in the pilot episode. And you were very gracious to allow us to read a copy of the script. And I'm intrigued and would be intrigued as a non-believer, let's say, because the message is not overt enough early on to, I think, turn off somebody who's interested in the topic but not yet accepted the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right.
But the enemy that you present up front in the opening episode, explain why you chose that particular enemy. Was that inspired by your visit to Caesarea Philippi?
Are you referring to the creature that's depicted in the trailer?
Yes. Yeah,
he's. I'm not going to say he's per se the enemy. He is something that is pretty significant. Azazel, or Azazel, depending on how you want to pronounce it. God says something very interesting about him in the books of Enoch and Joshua. It says that he ascribed all sin that was taking place when the Watchers started doing what they were doing in Genesis 6. He said, he looked down and the archangels are up there and they're talking and they're looking at what these fallen angels are doing, and they say, God, how long are you going to allow this to go on? And God says, okay, here's the deal, basically. Michael, you do this, Gabriel, you do that, and there's a couple other archangels, Uriel and Raphael. And he says to Raphael to bind Azazel in the desert place, a place called Dudiel, and keep him in chains until the day of judgment, and ascribe all sin to that creature. Now, that creature is actually mentioned in the Bible in the book of Leviticus. I believe it's Leviticus 16, but don't quote me on that. You can do the research. But where the Jews would sacrifice a lamb for the sins, and they would lay their hands on the scapegoat and send the scapegoat out to Azazel. Now, that's in our Bible. But if that's all you read, you have no idea who or what Azazel is, right? And so from that perspective, if you're thinking all sin is ascribed to Azazel, there's some very intriguing plot points for people to start thinking about in that regard. But he's definitely not the main bad guy going into this.
Oh, okay.
He just he's the one that sets Zach on his journey. Let me put it that way. You'll see more of him later because as I get to episode 72, start getting towards the end. In terms of the story, the end is what the Bible says the end is, and some interesting things are going to happen in the end, that being some of these really bad fallen angels are going to be released from their burial places in the desert. More of them come out of the river Euphrates, etc. So you've definitely not heard the last of that creature.
Okay.
He's not the main bad guy. No.
Not the main villain, huh?
Yeah, no.
Now, I was really intrigued by that because somebody had asked me a question about demons the other day.
Yes.
And I did a little word study on demons in the Old Testament and found that there are only a few places in the Old Testament where the word is even, or where a word is translated into English as demon, I should say. And Leviticus 17, there's a reference there where Moses is told that the people should quit sacrificing to, and the Hebrew seems to say goat demons.
Yeah.
Which again refers to Azazel, who is presented as a goat demon by some, but certainly the god Pan could be considered a goat demon.
And Baphomet, which is then you get into all the secret societies at that point. Right.
And so this all ties together again around Mount Hermon and the Grotto of Pan and the gates of hell. Okay, so all of this, how much of that are you weaving into the 72 episode story arc of Seed?
Oh, I'm weaving just about everything you can imagine into this. It's funny. We talked about this the other day, just briefly in email. I saw that you had a thing on Count Germain.
Saint Germain, yeah.
Yeah, Saint Germain.
Right.
And we had a little dialogue about his connections possibly to Ahasuerus, which has been known as the wandering Jew, cursed to wander the earth.
Right.
Christ returns. Literally everything that I've studied and researched my whole life is kind of dovetailing into this story. And that's one of the characters for sure. And I mean, he's an interesting character. It shows up in real life history, actually. Count Germain, Saint Germain, even to the point of some people believe that he was present at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So
that's right. Yeah, I heard Chris Pinto described that in an interview with Dr. Future several months ago. Kind of a mysterious character who just showed up at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And yes, New Agers believe that was Count Saint Germain.
Yeah, he shows up. There's a lot of writings in France and Europe, et cetera, where royalty would meet this guy at a certain time, and then like 30, 40 years later, they'd meet him again at some kind of, royal setting or whatever, and he hadn't aged a bit. Everybody else is, 30, 40 years older.
Mm-hmm.
So he was known as the man who never ages and stuff, and I'd done a lot of research in the late 90s, early part 2000 regarding people who have legends of being immortal. And so a lot of these kind of things are going to find their way in there. There's people who are out there that study this stuff are going to freak out, when
mm-hmm.
they start seeing what I'm going to do with it. And then real-life characters like Nicholas Roerich and
okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with him and that little box that he presented to Vice President Henry Wallace.
Yeah, he was sort of the guru to the Vice President of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Henry Wallace. Yeah.
Yes. He had a box that was presented to people or whatever, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding this box. I had some interesting conversations with Tom Horn about it and whatever possible connections it might have with Nimrod. And I'm not going to say too much about that because I don't want to give a lot of things away, but
mm-hmm.
there's going to be a lot of intriguing things. Just like I said earlier, just like Lost, and everyone's wondering what's the foot of the statue there. You know what I mean? It's like, what's the
right?
foot?
Yeah.
There's all these cool things that are, you can do the Googling, do the researching, and find out, wow, there's basis and truth here, and so I'm going to be putting a lot of that kind of stuff in there.
The series is called Seed. We're talking with Rob Skiba, who's the writer, director, producer of the forthcoming television series on A View from the Bunker. 646-652-4429 if you want to toss a question about any of his research or his opinion on the things that he's researched as preparation for this particular project. Now, how is the project coming along, Rob? I know that you are. Well, let me back up. I've got the sense from having just some brief contacts with this world, the video production world. Sharon's written a couple of spec scripts, and
sure.
And we've seen just a little bit from the outside looking in what's involved here, and it looks like a lot of work.
Yes.
What resources do you have to pull together to make this happen?
We're on the ground floor. First of all, we just, we wrote the script. We've got the outline. I talked to a gentleman the other day who was one of the former presidents of Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I had dinner with him a couple of days ago and gave me some advice and stuff like that, And just kind of talking through this, we are right at the very beginning stages of all this, and he said, I'm actually ahead of the curve because most people that are trying to pitch a TV series, they don't even have a script written. They've got an idea.
Go in with the three-word pitch, X-Files,
Battlestar Galactica, Lost, and X-Files, Yeah,
okay.
But, even Lost, if you look at the beginning of how Lost got started, that's all they had, and in like 11 weeks they went from concept to pilot, So he said, I'm ahead of the game just in having all that. But we've got producers, we've got directors, I'm looking for writers right now. I've got an amazing director of photography, all on standby. Of course, everybody needs to get paid, so we're waiting for the money. Show me the money is kind of where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
And raising money, we've raised probably about almost $60,000 so far, which is a drop in the bucket. That's just been sustenance money.
Mm-hmm.
It's just helped us to continue. But let me just say this: this is something cool. This is something interesting and intriguing. But I left my full-time job in April to do this because I really felt like God wants the story to be told. There's so much deception out there, and the church isn't talking about this stuff. Spirals over Norway? What?
Mm-hmm.
Some people say that was rockets or whatever, but I'm like, yeah, if you look at the petroglyphs that are all over the planet that depict the same thing with people and goats running for their lives underneath it, Jesus himself said there's going to be weird things in the sky in the last days, lying signs and wonders and whatnot. But the church isn't even, as Eli Marzulli says, they're asleep.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even aware of it. They're not talking about it. And so I really believe that God wants the truth about what all these other things that nobody's talking about in the church, but everybody's talking about on Ancient Aliens, and from a lie perspective, that God wants the truth to be told. And this whole story was literally downloaded to me in the desert of Arizona at the beginning of this year, episode 1. I spent 5 days in the desert that were just like Abraham, Moses, burning bush type experiences for 5 days in the desert, and literally wrote the story, like, boom, right there, and it came back with 72 episodes outlined. So I know that he's in this. I know that he wants this to get made, and the kind of crazy stories that we have had since April as far as how we've managed with no job, and literally anybody that I've gotten in front of that has the capacity to give anything has given it once I've gotten a chance to explain to them what we're trying to do. So we're at the point now where we're in the who do you know mode, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe in what we're doing? You know, check out our resources we have online at seedtheseries.com. You know, see what we're doing. If you want to get involved, please give us a call. We'd love to talk to you. So far, all we've done is kind of raise donations, but we're getting ready to form the limited partnership so we can accept investment money, of course, with a return on investment attached to it. So, and we're looking at about $1 million an episode right now, and we are looking at $4 million to start. That's going to pay for the first 3 episodes plus the marketing strategy that we have in mind. It's kind of revolutionary. I'm not going to give too much of that here, but it's different. And then we're hoping that after that it's going to become self-financing. So
the distribution of this, you hear stories coming out of Hollywood of producers, directors, writers, creators of series and films who kind of lose the direction of their creation because of
financing.
Well, because of financing, because of somebody at the network says, if you want to reach those 18 to 24s, you got to do this. I've got some experience with that as a radio program director. We're trying to reach a certain market segment, and you got the sales manager saying, if you played more oldies, we could get the buy from the grocery chain.
Right.
How will you protect against that?
Yeah, well, it's another one of those things where it's like, okay, God, well, you're our executive producer, so you're going to have to take care of some of that, if not all of it. But the strategy that we're going with is really not the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, or any of those. And the reason is because they can censor us, they can cancel us prematurely, they can control our content, and if we're going to try to give the world view that we're talking about here, that's not going to happen on any of those kind of major stations like that. So we're really going with more of an online strategy, and the reason for that is everything's going online anyway.
Yeah, true.
TVs are beginning to ship with internet capabilities and everything like that, but even the major networks, we don't watch TV except on streaming on the internet, HD, and we watch Fringe whenever we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we don't have to wait for 8 Central or whatever time it plays. And so being that everything's online anyway, I've already got the technology, the ability, and the people that know how to do that stuff as well. So it's like, why not just do it ourselves? I mean, really all you got to do is drive the traffic to your site.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's where the marketing campaigns, the strategy, and all that comes in.
Okay.
Getting the people to the site. Word of mouth takes over from there.
Yeah, and once you get it to that point, well, I can even stream video to the iPod that I'm holding right here, as long as I'm within range of a Wi-Fi signal. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Everything's going.
Yeah.
Everything's going to.
We cut the cable. Yeah, we cut the cable, and it's just internet here now in the bunker. One final question for Rob, or for you, Rob. What was the most surprising thing that you discovered in all the research that you've done leading up to this pilot script for Seed, the series?
Man, that's a loaded question. I'm not going to divulge it, but it would be the identity of the Antichrist. and it's nobody that you would think. It's like something as significant as that, the Bible's not going to be silent about it. And after some lengthy conversations and emails and studying of Tom Horn's material, Peter Goodgame and others.
Okay.
I think you know where I'm going with it. But,
yeah, I think so.
I think the evidence is overwhelming in favor of what some of the things that they've found, and I found some stuff even over and above what they talk about that leads me even more to that belief. So I would say by far that was the biggest revelation in what we've studied so far. I mean, that's pretty huge.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're going where I think you're going, I think that is a pretty big deal. So, yeah, we look forward to seeing that and look forward to following the progress as these pieces come together because, again, having read the script for the pilot, it is intriguing, it's compelling, and there are some characters in there who look somewhat familiar to those of us who are in Canton, Ohio. We'll leave people to wonder about that, too, as we watch for this to materialize and come to life. Rob, look forward to talking with you again and sharing more ideas and thoughts. Sadly, this hour went much too quickly. Rob Skiba, the writer, producer, director of the forthcoming series, Seed, and you'll find the information online at seedtheseries.com. Rob, again, a pleasure talking with you. Look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right. Coming up in hour number 2, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the issues coming out of the Middle East, areas near the locations depicted in the forthcoming series Seed. Yes. That and the Bunker Intelligence Briefing straight ahead as A View from the Bunker continues on the PID Radio Network. Welcome to the battlefield. This is A View from the Bunker, live every Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, GMT-5 at blogtalkradio.com/PID radio. Part of the PID Radio Network, which sounds big, but it's really just me and Sharon. And Sam the Dachshund, who is asleep underneath his Colts binky in the corner of the room tonight. All right, 646-652-4429, the Bunker phone open this hour. If you want to comment on last hour's discussion with Rob Skiba, and the use of entertainment to try to present a message. Is that an appropriate approach for Christians to take? We can talk about that if you like. If you want to post your comments in the chat room, rather type than talk, it's blogtalkradio.com/PID radio. Very active question and answer session taking place now as Rob Skiba has joined the chat room at blogtalkradio.com/PID radio. So if you've got a question, for Rob, who apparently got booted out of the chat room, but he's made it back in, you can interact directly with Rob there. There is a question that has been posted to Rob in the chat room, and I will toss it out for you to consider. Is it right for a professing Christian to put out something like this that will require an investment of a financial investment on the part of people to make it happen? I think that's a valid question, and Rob is addressing that right now in the chat room. So I will say this, that this particular approach, as Rob noted, does have some advantages from the standpoint of putting across the message. I mean, let's be honest. If people didn't suspend disbelief, and not just in a film, although a film is especially effective because you've got the visuals and you've got the sound and you're kind of immersed in a whole audio sensory experience, but even in just a written form, if this wasn't an effective way to communicate a message through the use of fiction, then Dan Brown wouldn't have drawn thousands upon thousands of pilgrims to Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland looking for the Holy Grail.
This is the first book in the Robert Langdon series. Dan Brown was really onto something when he wrote this. He was definitely onto this concept that very smart people in the 1600s were entertaining themselves in this art that they were creating.
The great thing about the book is, and all Dan's books, is that they are loaded with historical detail and an intense amount of research. It's really a gift. I mean, you just get to flip through and find out things you never knew. I think that's part of what people go to these movies for and what they buy Dan's books for, is that level of scholarship.
Galileo's third text.
For Angels and Demons, I did the bulk of the research before I wrote the novel. Made 3 trips to Italy, spent a lot of time in Rome and Vatican City, gathering information on churches and artwork and Vatican history.
What's great about the stories that Dan Brown creates is that they stimulate so much curiosity, discussion, and research. Everybody that I know gets involved with the project, working on it, having read the book, seeing our movie now. It drives them to the library. It sends them to the internet. They want to explore the Illuminati, and there's so much written about it. It's fascinating stuff, and it's the kind of thing that leads to a fascinating set of clues and a great mystery.
And essentially all Dan Brown did with the Da Vinci Code was repackage Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Bagent and Lee into a fictional form. Now, I tried to read Holy Blood, Holy Grail years ago when I was in my questing phase, trying to figure out how much of the Bible was actually true, I mean literally true and accurate. And found out later that this was a process that my father, an engineer, had gone through himself, reading things like the Passover plot to see if maybe there was an alternate explanation for the existence of Christianity, besides the one in the Bible that made more sense. And Dad, with his engineer's brain, finally concluded that the only logical explanation for the existence of Christianity past the end of the first century was that the New Testament was really true. Found out that I guess I am indeed my father's son. I kind of followed the same path. But when you read a book like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, I couldn't get through it. It was so densely written, and there were so many leaps of logic that just couldn't be substantiated with the evidence that I just finally put it aside. I never finished the book. And I suspect a lot of other people felt the same way. I mean, it sold a lot of copies, but it didn't have the impact on society that Dan Brown's fictional work, The Da Vinci Code, did. And why is that? Well, it's because, as Rob pointed out, people have a natural suspension of disbelief when they go in to watch or read something fictional. And so Dan Brown effectively communicated his Gnostic hoo-ha in the Da Vinci Code and in Angels and Demons. No, not so much, but certainly the Lost Symbol communicated that and managed to work in through including the Institute of Noetic Sciences in the Lost Symbol. Brown also managed to start pointing people toward the singularity. So why can't we as Christians use this method to communicate our ideas of the truth? That's exactly why Sharon and I chose to write fiction. The Laodicea Chronicles, Winds of Evil, The God Conspiracy, Signs and Wonders, Sharon's forthcoming novel, Doctrines of Demons. But the tightrope that we walk, of course, is how do you present that and put that out there and share that message without becoming a mercenary, as it were, without making it about the money. And that's a difficult tightrope to walk. We chose one path, and that we used a site out there, and in fact, we could do it without this particular website, but I recorded a couple of my novels as free audiobooks that are posted now at audiobooks.com as a means to get the message out there without people having to pay for it. So that is one possibility. But it's a lot cheaper for me to do that sitting here in front of a microphone than it is to do what Rob Skiba is attempting to do with Seed the Series and film and produce a television program with production values that will appeal to people and that will draw people in, especially if they're not already inclined to believe the message. Sharon and I, as soon as when Seed is finally ready for the screen, of course, the subject matter will draw us in. We watch a lot of things that are that relate to this topic, and most of them are not produced from a Christian perspective. I mean, the subject matter is fascinating, and often as not, we're watching to find out what message is being put out there into the pop culture, so that we can discuss it and talk about it on PID Radio. So anyway, best of luck to Rob. And again, I'll share a little bit more about Seed the Series in terms of a character who will probably look familiar to you if you go to the website seedtheseries.com and click around a little bit. You'll probably discover who I'm talking about. And should point out that if you are really curious, Rob has graciously made the script for the pilot episode available to read for free at seedtheseries.com. It's available in PDF format. You can download it and read it and see what you think. Well, 646-652-4429 as we continue through the evening here on A View from the Bunker. Again, a very active chat room session going on with Rob Skiba, the gentleman behind the forthcoming series, Seed the Series. And I mentioned to you that the script of the pilot episode is online. You can take a look at that, download it, read it, and I'm sure that Rob will welcome your feedback, your suggestions, perhaps. But when you go to the website, I want to just point you to one particular gentleman here. Under the link for the characters, there are some pictures there. These are types that Rob is looking for the characters that he's described in the pilot episode. And there's a gentleman there who's fourth from the left in the top row. He's the gentleman who's follically challenged, bearded gentleman. The character named Dr. Norman Vincent Kane, who Rob describes as a cross between Richard C. Hoagland and Tom Horn. So if that isn't enough to get you to download the PDF copy of the pilot episode of Seed and take a look at that, I don't know what will, because now I can't. I've read the episode, and while reading the description of the cross between Richard Hoagland and Tom Horn, created a very vivid mental image that helped to really, let's say, make it easier to picture what was going on in the scene. Meanwhile, keep your eyes on the Middle East and the sort of low-grade conflict that's taking place between Lebanon, or over Lebanon, between Syria and Iran on the one side, Israel and the United States on the other side. And interesting, isn't it, that it's taking place over Lebanon and possession thereof, considering all that we discussed regarding Mount Hermon in the first hour with Rob Skiba. And Mount Hermon, of course, is in southern Lebanon. Interesting, no? Coming up next Friday night, Brandon Barr, Mike Lynch, co-authors of the new novel American Midnight, on View from the Bunker, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That's GMT-5 at blogtalkradio.com/PID radio. Until next time, remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is A View from the Bunker.